Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today I was going to discuss the full moon or Purnima that's happening on June 11th, 2025. This talk is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. And it seems like the theme for this moment is upsetting the apple cart. So let's take a look. Note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. And you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. If you're new to the channel, just a few announcements and orientation. Auto dubbing is now available on this channel in 8 languages. The list is here. You can take a look. That might be useful or helpful to some of you. Also, all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means I have a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. My channel is all about playlists. I'm good about organizing my videos into playlists so that they're easy to find on different topics. So like this kind of video, if you're interested in more, is in my planetary transits and gochara playlist. Also, if you're interested in learning astrology through looking at famous birth charts, I have a video titled Birth Chart Archive List 2025, where I list all the famous people, places, and moments in time, their charts, and the videos you can find them in. The last 3 teaching videos I posted, in case you missed any, are Parvata and Kahala Yogas for power, leadership, and wealth. What is mundane astrology? And then Sagittarius constellation or Dani Rashi. And if you're new to all this and want to get a good start, these videos that I've listed at the end of the slide are really foundational videos. So they should help you get a really solid footing in Vedic astrology and also help you get more out of talks like this because it's mostly an interpretation talk today. Okay, so let's see. Excuse me. So this is the chart for the full moon or Purnima that's happening June 11th. And let's see. Sorry, it's kind of early and I'm trying to get hydrated here with my voice so I can get through the talk. But let me just take a sip of water here. All right, hopefully that helps. So anyway, if you so this chart, this is a North Indian style chart if you're not familiar. And to orient you, the top diamond in the middle is the first house, also known as the ascendant or rising sign, or in Sanskrit, it's known as the lagna. Okay. So this is the constellation that's rising east at this moment in time. Okay. So we have a little 1 in the bottom corner of this diamond, and that little 1 refers to not the first house, even though it is the first house. It's the first constellation of the zodiac, which is Aries or Mesha in Sanskrit. Okay, so we have an Aries rising chart. So that's all already important because not just, like Aries rising folks, this might be a little more specific for them. But an Aries rising chart is also considered to be the natural zodiac. So when we have the first zodiac sign, a constellation in the first house, that gives us also a chart for the whole, world or humanity. So it's like a collective energy chart. Okay. And to get to the other houses, you count counterclockwise. So if you go up into the left here, that upside down triangle with the sun in it and the 2 in the bottom corner, that's the second house. And then you count around to the 12 houses. Okay. So the full moon is happening at 3:44 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So that's New York time. And yeah, that's the time zone I live in. So the day lord of this moment of time is Mars, and the hora lord or hour lord is Sun. So that's already telling us something, okay? Because Mars and Sun are the 2 fire planets, and they're also the 2 leadership planets. So fire is going to give us action and leadership, okay? So the difference between these 2, though, Sun is more like the president or king, and Mars is more like the CEO or the commander-in-chief of the army. So Sun can be a little bit more symbolic in some ways, or more of a figurehead, and Mars is somebody who's going to roll up their sleeves and get into the nitty-gritty details and in the trenches. Okay. So already, though, this is a lot of fire and leadership going on here. Okay, and we can see, and then the main thing here is that we're going to see that what we keep picking up is especially this Mars. Okay, and Mars and Sun are actually both related to the 5th house here. Because you can see Mars is there. It just crossed into this 5th house of this chart, which is a Leo chart, because that little 5 in the corner refers to the 5th constellation of the zodiac of Leo or Simha. Okay. So Leo is a fixed fire sign. So that means that in and of itself means there's a lot of action here. And Mars is there, so we have a fire planet in a fire sign. And Mars is at 2 degrees 26 minutes. So the nakshatra that Mars is in, a nakshatra, if you're not familiar, is also called a lunar mansion. There are about 27 of them in Vedic astrology, and each one has a different energy and symbols associated with it and such, okay? So Mars is in the nakshatra called Maga. Maga is symbolized by a throne. So again, we're like double, tripling up on, hierarchy and leadership energy here, okay? The thing also is that Mars is with Ketu. Okay, so Mars, I mentioned, is a fire planet. Mars in general is like a innovative planet. It's an initiator planet. It's like a sort of fly by the seat of your pants planet. Frankly, it can be a bit erratic. It can be a bit irrational, impulsive, um, but fiery and kind of courageous. Okay. But with Mars in this Leo constellation of 5th house, we have Ketu here. Ketu is like Mars, but even more erratic, more unusual, more unexpected. And Ketu can be like a kind of a separationist type of energy. Okay. So when you get Mars and Ketu together, okay, in any sign, not just Leo here, these two together, coming together, that creates a lot of explosive energy, and that could be literal. So, like, just a few examples of when Mars and K2 were, close to each other, coming closer to each other, which they are, because Mars is going forward and K2 is going retrograde. K2 is always retrograde. That line under K2 means it's retrograde, so it's going backwards. So these two are inching forward closer together, and they will cross in a few weeks. Okay, so that means tension is going to be building here. But a few examples of when Mars and K2 were closer, crossing each other, was a couple of years ago. Israel got bombed, and then last fall, what was it? The walkie-talkies and cell phones blew up in Lebanon, and then more recently, in January of this year, there were forest fires. These massive forest fires that like really leveled a lot of Los Angeles and California. Okay, so you see, this is what we've got going on, and this will be going on through July. Mars and K2 in Leo here, okay? And then Sun is in the 2nd house here. Let me just say about the 5th house. The 5th house represents things such as children, such as counseling and advice, and also romance, okay? Among other things. So you can see that there's going to be some sort of explosive actions going on in those areas of life. Okay. Now the Sun is in the 2nd house. The 2nd house represents the family, inner circle, also speech, also assets. Okay. Now Sun at this particular moment. Let me just double check on this. Hold on just a second. Oh, and so let me just back up a minute here before I go on, before I move on to the next slide. Yeah, I just wanted to mention like why I thought the theme for this moment of time was upsetting the apple cart. That phrase is used because apples usually when they're stacked like at the grocery store in a car, truck or whatever, like they're all stacked all nice and it's neat and they're pretty and the beautiful colors or whatever. And then the upsetting the apple cart is like again bringing that kind of disruption energy to something that's nice and neat and pretty and natural and nutritious. And again, we were in that energy for a while with Sun in Rohini, the nakshatra before Mrigashirsha. Rohini is considered to be the most attractive, seductive, kind of fertile, luscious energy, and it's in Taurus, which is related to like farming and stuff like that. So Sun was in Rohini for a while. We had Mercury in Rohini and Jupiter in Rohini for a long time. So there was this kind of, nice, stable energy to some extent. but we're moving out of that. So that's part of the reason for what it seemed like the theme of the moment is. So there you go. Okay, so I didn't want to misspeak on that. So I just want to check. So Sun is in the nakshatra of Mrigashirsha. Okay. So Mrigashirsha is symbolized by a deer's head. So in a lot of folklore around the world, a deer, when you see deer as a symbolism in literature, it's like, the searching, seeking energy through the unknown forest, okay? So, the sun here in the second house, this is like, again, some figurehead or president, or the sun also represents father, who's seeking, second house issues. Okay, so assets and speech, okay, going on here. Um, so yeah, and so the sun, again, because of those energies, that's also sort of the underlying energy of this Mars K2 in the fifth house. Okay, so there's some seeking leadership here. Okay, but through chaotic means is what we can see. Okay, that's what we're already picking up. Now, the dasha period of this chart, and the dasha period is a planetary period. The dasha period indicates planets that you can consider more active or influential at specific times. So the dasha period for this chart is Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, K2. Okay, and you can see Mercury and Jupiter are in the third house here. Mercury and Jupiter, they both represent communication. Like Jupiter's more oral communication, Mercury's more written communication. And they're in the third house of nonverbal communication. Okay, and let's see. So Jupiter is combust at this time, meaning it's so close to the sun you can't see it in the sky. It's essentially eclipsed. Jupiter will be eclipsed for about a month, and it just went combust today. Today's the 9th as I'm recording this. So Jupiter is the great natural benefic. It represents things like balance, fairness, justice, law, generosity, diplomacy. So when Jupiter goes combust, it means those things all, external manifestations of those things is not seen. Okay, and just an example of when Jupiter went combust, it did go combust last year in May, and actually Jupiter and Venus were both combust. Venus is another natural benefic. When Jupiter and Venus went combust last May, in the United States at least, we had a bunch of students protesting at different universities and vandalizing property and barricading themselves, protesting, politics in the Middle East. Okay, so this means, you can see probably a lot of legal issues and stuff going on. Okay, and Mercury here is, and Jupiter is in the nakshatra at this particular moment of Mrigashirsha as well. So there's also like the seeking energy of justice. Okay. Mercury is in its own sign here of Gemini. Gemini is a dual air sign. That means so mixed ideas, dual ideas, contrasting ideas. And Mercury, it's on its own sign. That'll make this third house strong of nonverbal communication. And Mercury, though, is in a different nakshatra. It's in a nakshatra of Ardra. Ardra is symbolized by a storm cloud and lightning. So this could be like, rapid fire communicating. And since it's like nonverbal, Jupiter and Venus are here. Jupiter can represent, Mercury can represent writing, and Jupiter can represent publishing. This could be like a lot of news, literally, or this could be like texting or that sort of thing going on here. Really shocking, again, the storm cloud, Mercury here. Shocking events and news being written about here. Seeking justice. Okay. So we're picking up those two energies in this dasha period. Mercury and Jupiter also represent education as well. So, and we'll talk about that, but a little bit more later on. But and then also with Mercury and Jupiter in the dasha period, we have Saturn and K2. So K2 I talked about a little bit. It's this kind of explosive separatist energy in the fifth house here. Oh, the fifth house can also represent a stage, because the fifth house, the natural constellation sign there, and it is in this chart as well as Leo, and Leo can represent a stage or a high level venue. Okay. So this falling out, this conflagration that's happening here in the fifth house is happening at a high level. Okay. And Saturn is a planet representing obstacles, delays, deaths, chronic issues, that sort of thing. it's in the 12th house of losses and expenditures. Okay. So Saturn is also the ruler of the 10th house, which relates to like 9 to 5 daily activities, and the 11th house of income, clubs, groups, and society. So there's losses here since the 10th/11th lord is gone. 12th. There's losses in daily activity. There's destruction coming from daily activity, and also income in clubs, groups, society. Saturn is not only a planet representing things like delays, obstacles, death, destruction, but it's in a nakshatra called Uttara Falguni at this time. Uttara Falguni is represented by the back legs of funeral pyres. So again, more death, destruction, flames, as if we don't have enough already, okay? At least with Uttara Falguni, it's the back legs of a funeral pyre. So there is this indication of actually a little bit of distance or surrendering or starting to get like a little bit objective of the transformation or losses that have happened, and then trying to like create some new order out of it. Okay. The thing though is that Saturn will be going retrograde, not too distant future. And so when it goes retrograde, it's going to go back up into Purva Falguni, or sorry, did I say Purva Falguni? I meant Uttara Falguni. I meant Uttara Bhadrapada. Okay, if I said Uttara Falguni, it's Uttara Bhadrapada, the back legs of funeral pyre. But when Mars goes retrograde, I need to slow down a little bit. So anyway, you can see there's also a lot of compulsive energy in my speech today. So things are heating up. So anyway, the Saturn, not Mars, Saturn in the 12th house, currently in Uttara Bhadrapada, will be going retrograde and backing up into Purva Bhadrapada, which is just cremation, like flames and smoke and things turning to ash, but there's no sense of like order or distance or objectivity. So it's actually more chaotic than the nakshatra Saturn's currently in. Okay, Saturn also represents as Saturn and Mars actually both are bhumi karakas. Bhumi basically means land or property, and karaka is a symbol. So you can see that there's literally physical property and land that's being destroyed here or lost here with the Mars and the Saturn in their current positions. Okay, so again, Mercury and Jupiter, writing, communication, Saturn and K2, endings and distance, going on here. Okay. And then the dasha period is switching from Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, K2 to Mercury, Jupiter, Mercury. So that's kind of nice. So what that means is this it may not seem, temporary enough, but the Saturn K2 time period that's probably quite destructive and explosive will be switching to Mercury and Jupiter. Okay, only. So and this Mercury and Jupiter on its own actually is potentially nice, except for Mercury's an ardra here. But by the time September rolls around, Jupiter will be out of combustion. We'll get that, we'll be seeing external manifestations of law and balance and justice again. Jupiter also represents teachers and children. So the other thing about the 5th house of Mars and K2 is it represents children. So there can potentially be issues with children, some sort of frankly explosive event. I mean, God forbid. I always hope I'm wrong about bad news, but sometimes, I always say that's the worst part about being an astrologer is being right about bad news, but there can be issues here with loss of children. Okay. So hopefully that's not triggering to anybody. But with Mercury and Jupiter here moving into that dasha period, Jupiter and Mercury at that point will move past this Ardra nakshatra because Jupiter will move past it. So they're both Mercury and Jupiter are moving through the storm cloud. So you can expect, through quite a bit of the summer, like shocking, news and a lot of verbal communication and debating and negotiating and that sort of thing going on. Okay, especially since this is the 3rd house in written communication. Okay, back and forth and some sort of writing. And this could be legally as well, like documents and contracts and stuff like that. Okay, so Yeah, it's gonna be, again, if you saw my last video, no, was it the last video? But my monthly video for June, I was talking about these energies and how things were gonna be heating up. It seems like they are already. Okay, yeah, so that's the dasha period. So the Lagna nakshatra, so that's the rising sign nakshatra, is a Sandhi Krittika. So Sandhi is for any planet or point in the chart that is within a degree before or after of a sign change or constellation change. And you can see the ascendant here is at 20 degrees, 28 degrees, 3 minutes. So, and the ascendant is very quickly moving. Most ascendants, they last on average about 2 hours. So within a few minutes, we're going to switch from an Aries rising chart to a Taurus rising chart here. Okay. So when we have a Sandhi point, though, that means that there's inherent instability. Okay, as if we need some looking at this chart. Okay, just from whatever I mean. As if we need instability, there is instability here. Okay. The other thing is that Lagna nakshatra is in Krittika nakshatra, is in Krittika. Krittika is symbolized by Kartikeya, the commander-in-chief of the celestial army. So again, we're getting more fighting power here. Yeah. And Krittika is a dual nakshatra, though, so there's also some mixed energy going on here. Krittika, the other symbol of Krittika is like a foster mothers, because Kartikeya was raised by various foster mothers. So it's kind of like this, nurturing, fighting, like, or protecting through fighting type energy. It can also be advocacy. Okay. So there's some fighting, nurturing going on here. And again, this is happening in Aries. Aries is a movable fire sign. So again, we have a lot of action going on here. Yeah. And then the moon nakshatra is in a Gandanta Jyestha position. So Gandanta is similar to Sandhi, except that they're of the 12 Sandhi points. And again, these are at the first or last degree of a sign. There are 3 of these Sandhi points which are particularly virulent. Okay, so that's whenever you pass from a water sign to a fire sign. Okay, and so Gandanta is even more unstable because not only are you changing signs, when you change signs, each sign is a different element. When you change signs, you're changing elements. So you're going from like fire to water, or sorry, the other way, water to fire, or fire to earth, or that sort of thing. But at these 3 Gandanta points, you're also changing nakshatras. So it's like a dual level of um, instability. Okay. So you can see the moon here is in the last 3 degrees of Scorpio in the 8th house. Okay, so that means the moon is unstable, and moon represents things like emotions, intuitive mind, and also the public as well. Mother, potentially. Okay. And this chart, even more so, because the moon is the lord of the 4th house. So moon is a planet symbolizing mother, and the 4th house symbolizes mother, but in an Aries Lugna, the moon is even more important for understanding 4th house issues, and 4th house issues are mother, home, happiness. So, and you can see moon is in the last 3 degrees, and the moon is also a fast mover, so within, about an hour or so, maybe an hour, a couple hours, moon is going to be shifting from Scorpio into Sagittarius, crossing the Skandanta point. And Jyestha is a nakshatra associated with protection. So you can see there's a lot of like fighting and protecting and shocking and, not a lot. Luckily, Jupiter and Sun are in Mrigashirsha, although Jupiter is moving out of Mrigashirsha into Ardra in the next couple days after this full moon. But these planets and Sun also as well. So within a few days, Sun and Jupiter are moving out of Mrigashirsha. Well, not the Sun. Sun's going to be it's going to be in Gemini and Mrigashirsha for a few more days. But Jupiter's moving into Ardra. That's going to make it more of that storm cloud energy. And then within about 10 days, Sun will be in Ardra as well. So, one by one, these planets are again, moving into like fighting and protecting energy places, yeah. So we have the unstable moon in Jyestha protecting, but also the moon is in the 8th house, which is a negative house. The 8th house is related to long-term deep problems. So, that's not essential. That's not favorable, a favorable position. The sun nakshatra I mentioned is in Mrigashirsha, so that's in the sun is in a seeking, energy. So, already what you can see, basically the lugna, the sun, you can see the sun's going to switch signs in a few days here on the 14th or 15th. Mars just changed signs. You can see it's in the second degree of Leo, and Mars just crossed a Gandanta point. So Mars was, very unstable. Then Rahu is, still it's just coming out of still pretty close to Sunday point. I usually take 2 degrees as Sunday, even though technically it's 1 degree, because I think what I see with planets, it takes them until they get into the second degree, fully into the second degree, um, or I guess even third degree, it can still be unstable. And then again, with fast moving planets, it's like, even like 3 degrees and stuff like that. So Lugna, and Sun, Mars, and then Rahu and Ketu, again, both moving into more stability because they just cross signs, and the moon. So we're recently or soon to be Sundhi or Gandanta. So this is a lot of instability, and these planets represent Sun, Mars, fire, decision, leadership, Rahu, Ketu, unusual, unexpected events, and moon, mind, and public. So a lot of instability with the mind and actions is what we're seeing here. Okay. So let's take a look house by house, see what we see. So the lugna again is Aries or Mesha. It's a movable fire sign or char agni, so a lot of actions going on here. Venus is up here in the top, which seems pretty nice in a way, because Venus is a natural benefic, like Jupiter, and Venus is the worldly counselor advisor. So again, we're also picking up again, like the 5th house with this Mars K2, we're picking up some sort of advisory or counseling energy. And Venus is in a nakshatra called Ashwini. Ashwini's, can be a little bit aggressive, intense, but also generally fairly nice. Because Ashwini is symbolized by the Kumara twins, who are the celestial physicians or healers, of the zodiac. And so there can be this like healing, rescuing energy. Okay. So there's some sort of worldly counsel to rush in, on the horse, because literally, like in the depictions, Kumara twins are riding around on horses, sort of rush in on your, trusty steed and save the day here. Okay. The only thing though is that Ashwini is in the star of Ketu. Okay, so Ketu again is with Mars in this 5th house of a fixed fire sign. So actually, this Venus, which seems pretty beneficial or whatever, is actually pinging this Ketu energy. And the thing is, it's in Aries here, and Aries is ruled by Mars. So actually, this Venus is bringing this Mars Ketu energy to the 1st house. So instability and arguments and explosive energy and, maybe trying to find some sort of diplomacy through this all. But to what degree, it's hard to say. Okay, so we put this all together. A lot of action, rescuing, healing, counseling, advocating energy, but there's an unstable instability here and dualness because of that Krittika nakshatra. So it's sort of like, fighter and or lover. Like, which way are we going here? Or maybe both. And again, this is going to be a very explosive energy and impulsive energy because the backdrop of Aries is this Mars with Ketu. And again, Venus is getting a double dose through Aries ruled by Mars and being in Ashwini, whose star is Ketu. So Venus is sandwiched in between all this Mars and Ketu energy in a fixed fire sign. Yeah, so it's like Venus is on fire, frankly. Yeah, so and again, this unusual energy as well. So the counseling or advising that might be going on here is something that's really pretty radical. It might actually be advice to, rather than play nice, which is generally the energy of Venus, because Venus is like the social grace planet. It's like the finer things of life. It's like fine food and dining and traveling and pets and I don't know. I always think of like pink frosted cupcakes for some reason when I think of Venus. It's like romance and all these nice things. But again, Venus is swimming in this ocean, the energy of Mars and Ketu. So this could be like a radical, very radical or unexpected advice to, rather than play nice, like maybe give some tough love, or maybe like, take a stance and say, yeah, we're gonna move forward, in this more chaotic way, explosive way. I mean, the advice, and again, Mars and Ketu in the fifth house, this could literally be advice to, get aggressive here, rather than play nice in diplomacy. It's like, no, we're going to take a stance. And, especially with Jupiter being combust, it's like, words, it's almost like words are not enough. Like there has to be like a show of power. That may be the unusual advice going on here. Okay. So the Lugnatia, that's the ruling planet of the chart, is Mars, as I mentioned. It's in Maga with Ketu. Ketu's in a nakshatra called Uttar Falguni. Uttar Falguni is symbolized by a hammock, which sounds pretty nice, comfy, cozy, relaxing, easy breezy. And it can be, but there's also this, it can symbolize like creativity and the finer things of life, but also it's those things with a sense of purpose. So with K2 being here, this may be like, again, releasing or, destroying even this nice, easy breezy, relaxing energy of swinging in a hammock. So again, there's another energy here of not really like, being so nice and pleasant. Again, maybe like a tough love type, situation. Now, Mars has gone to the fifth house. The fifth house is a dharmasthana, which is about duty. So, again, this first house, and the first house really is really important for any chart because it shows the physicality of somebody, but also the personality of somebody. And the fifth house also represents the intellect. So the mind here is on fire. I mean, this is not, this is like a rebellious, energy going on here in the mind. And so, yeah, yeah, so, so when we put all this together, it's like, the duty here, the practical advice here is to, find and take leadership, ownership, rebellious counseling, unusual counseling, seeking a stage, and also maybe related to children, education, teachers, disruption, explosion, that sort of thing, fiery intellect, also an independent mind, because this Mars with K2, it's sitting here in the fifth house of intellect, but Mars is also the ruler of the eighth house here of deep psychology. So, in the moon being in Jyestha, the mind and emotions are protective, and Mars is again on fire. And then this eighth house also not only has Mars as a ruler, and Mars is aspecting this house as well, on top of just ruling that house. So it's going to be a strong eighth house of deep psychology. But also the sun is aspecting here. So again, we're picking up this Mars and sun energy, not only in the fifth house of intellect, but in the eighth house of deep psychology. And again, I've mentioned, this Mars and K2 can be, again, an explosive, but like, fairly hostile type energy. And we're getting that in the mind, not just through the fifth house and the eighth house, but the fact that the moon is there. So, yeah. So things are heating up, mentally for sure, and emotionally. And again, with this Mars and K2, K2 on its own, Rahu and K2, the north, and K2 is the south node of the moon, Rahu is the north node of the moon. Those two planets on their own can represent like a, kind of impulsive, compulsive, obsessive behavior. And then Mars is an action planet. So when you get Mars on the Rahu K2 axis, this can be like a lot of impulsive, compulsive, obsessive energy. And again, we're getting this Mars on the Rahu Ketu axis in the 5th house of a stage, like a public stage, but also the 11th house of clubs, groups, and society. So currently in the United States, for example, everything I've been talking about, in LA, I mentioned early on that one of the last times we had Mars and Ketu sort of in conjunction or aspecting each other was in January, and we had those fires that leveled a lot of LA. And now LA is back in the news because now there's a bunch of protests going on regarding immigration policy with the new immigration policy with the new Trump administration. And so there were protests going on, and then apparently President Trump sent in the National Guard. And usually the National Guard is sent in by request when the governor of the state asks for that national support. But Trump just sent them in, which has not been done since like the 1960s. So what, 40, 60 years or so? It's not been done. So he kind of single-handedly, sent these troops in, and when the troops came in, apparently things went haywire and things were peaceful, but then the protests became violent. And then the last news alert I got was that now California is suing the Trump administration for sending in the National Guard because they feel like sending in the National Guard made things worse and kind of, put fuel on sort of set a blaze or, lit a match to a potentially hostile situation. It all just blew over. Or maybe I should say blew up. So anyway, so you can see just in that LA situation, like, hostilities, unusual practical advisements, and then legal issues as well, because again, and fairness. So, and on several levels. So the protesters are, um, you know, uh, fighting against new immigration policy. So that's legal. They're doing it, verbally and in a physical way by gathering together. And now California is suing the Trump administration. So you can see how this is playing out already. And then we have a bunch of yogas in this chart. So yogas are planetary combinations. What they do is they give meta effects, those kind of super effects to a chart. So this is kind of uh, beyond just analyzing each planet in each house. So there's a bunch in this chart. There's a kartari yoga. So the kartari is we have natural malefic planets on either side flanking the lugna. So we have Sun and Saturn there. So what that does is it creates obstacles and delays and barriers. Okay, so this Venus that's on fire is up against this wall, essentially, trying to break through this wall. We also have a Chandra Mangala yoga. That's the position of the Moon and Mars. That also indicates property, which I was discussing with Mars and Saturn getting pinged, through the different dasha and day lord stuff that I talked about. We also have a Kala Sarpa yoga. That's all the planets on one side of the Rahu Ketu axis with the other. That provides an unusual energy as well as ambition energy. So there's more of that in the chart. We also have a Shubha Bhayachari yoga here. And that is, we have natural benefic planets flanking the sun. So that's going to give, strength to these sun leadership. But we have two different leaders going on here. We have this like sort of protected leader, of the sun, and then we have this explosive leader of Mars. So you can see there's like, again, what we're picking up is like two very different types of leaders here. Like, like I could see this as being like, president versus the governor, of California right now. Two very different styles of leadership coming up against each other. So that Shubha Bhayachari, the natural benefics on either side of the sun, is giving protection, but also eloquence and power and strength there to the sun. What else? So there's also a Parvata yoga here. So this is the I did a video on Parvata and Kala yoga. I meant the reason why I thought about that video is because they're dispositor yogas, but they're two different versions or definitions. And the definition of Parvata in this chart is actually the second one from the Brihat Parashara Hora, which is an ancient text on Vedic astrology. And Parvata you get from having only natural benefics in the kendras, which are the four central houses here, and or the was it the eighth house. Okay, so we have that here actually. So Venus and Moon, they're only natural benefics, and Moon is challenged because it's going, it's basically Gandanta, it's unstable, it's crossing into Sagittarius very quickly, and then we've got two malefics on it, but Moon is full. So that would still give that would make Moon a natural benefic in this chart. Depending on, like when the Moon is new, it's a natural malefic. So you always got to look at the phase of the Moon, how much light it's reflecting to know if it's a natural malefic or benefic, or if it's acting as a natural malefic or benefic in a chart. Yeah, so that's going to give, also more leadership and power and strength. Okay. Yeah. And also like Venus and Moon in these positions, like Venus and Moon are the two emotional planets. So whatever's going on here, it's coming to fisticuffs essentially, like it's coming to a physical fight, but also legal fight. But it's quite emotional here. Okay, especially with all this erratic action going on. There's like some debate, going on, some hashing out of issues, on paper, and probably social media or whatever with this Jupiter Mercury, but then you have this Mars and Ketu. And again, these planets are shifting into, increasingly aggressive, virulent nakshatras over the next few weeks. So looks like things are probably going to get worse before they get better. And then we're going to have other things popping up besides what's going on in LA. So, like, I think there are also like similar protests starting up in San Francisco. So this might be again like last year when the students protested. It's like it started at one place and then there were some kind of copycat, activities going around the country. So we'll see how this goes. So all these yogas together: obstacles, delays, property, wealth times 3. Ambition, unusual, but some sort of attractive eloquence as well. Some famous. So this is gonna be famous. Whatever happens, it's going down in history probably. Leadership, charitable, learned. So there's some attempt to try to quell this before it blows up, but it's like based on the way things are heading, it's gonna blow up. Frankly, hopefully not. I always hope I'm wrong with bad news, but it looks like it might go that way. And then we have chidra grahas here. Chidra grahas are planets of vulnerability. So you can think of these as sensitive points or Achilles heel. So we have Jupiter and Venus. Okay, so already those are the two diplomacy planets and the two, gracious planets. They're also the two advisors. Okay, so that's a point of contention because one, Venus is again swimming in this Mars Ketu energy, and then Jupiter's combust. So you've lost one of your external advisors, and then Venus is, on fire as well. So that's not great. Moon again, a very Venus and Moon are the two emotional planets. So again, a very emotional moment of time. And then Saturn again, all these losses of people, of work. Because I think they were specifically, where was it happening? I think the LA protest blew up because the whatever national forces were going through the garment district in LA, and they were looking for undocumented workers, so they were trying to flesh that out. Um, so yeah, so yeah, yeah. So again, there's going to be loss of workers and employment with this sweeping, activity here. And then you can see this Mars and Rahu in the 11th house. That's going to be like, aggressive action in clubs, group society. And yeah, so you can see that happening here. Yeah, so the yogi in the chart That's a planet that represents wealth, is Venus. It's right at the top there. And the Aviyogi is Jupiter, which can represent a lack of wealth. It's actually kind of nice when the Aviyogis combust, because that can mean that the external manifestation of lack of wealth are not seen. So that actually may be kind of nice. And then the duplicate yogi, which also represents wealth, is Mars. So you can see like there are different means of developing wealth in this chart. So, what do we have here when we get this all together is we have like leading, some sort of rescue mission through speech, but also like some sort of physical and psychological, altering jolt of, shocking event. Essentially, that's what we've got here. Okay. So then if we look at the other houses, second house here, second house lord is Venus. So that brings us back to, second house issues, speech, family, inner circle, close friends, assets. Again, that energy is going to the first house, which is, at stake here. And the sun is there, and it's aspected by Saturn and the moon. So luckily the moon is exalted in the second house. So this can be, again, like, protective speech by authorities, like trying to talk people out of, things blowing up. But again, we have Saturn aspecting here. So there's going to be like a pushback. Okay, there's like a pushback or delays. So there's more and more drag happening here. So as much as right now leaders are trying to talk people out of getting more aggressive, again, it looks like things are going to maybe get worse. Again, hopefully not, but maybe. So the second house, loss of assets, close loved ones, and again, seeking order, protection through speech, leadership of speech. And the third house lord is the Swan, Mars and Ardra. Again, a very fiery writing, speech, combust Jupiter, Mrigashirsha. So, and also that storm cloud energy of Ardra represents sadness. So sadness, but also logic and digital writing, publication. And again, this might be, seeking children, justice for children and teachers. So another thing here, besides the example about LA, the other situation in the United States, at least at this moment, that's, blowing up, is that, excuse me, President Trump has, um, really sort of targeted Harvard University, for I believe it is diversity practices, because basically he's withholding federal funding from the university because they refuse to follow his recommendations regarding that. So again, that you could also see that situation going on here, like the argument, and then now I think Harvard's suing the Trump administration as well. So again, a lot more legal issues, and I don't know. Hopefully not, but maybe there'll be some, physical protests as well regarding that kind of stuff. I mean, as if we don't have enough going on, right? So hopefully not, but yeah, it could be. So yeah, so seeking justice regarding children, teachers, and then the third house again is like friends, siblings, neighbors. So um, this is like the sort of local community. You can kind of think of the third house as like the local community, government, authority, and education, because we have the two education plans there. So again, debating, negotiating, negotiating, mental processing as well of what's going on, like the probably news and media and legal things going on, but also divided thinking. Because again, some people are like totally, pro anti-immigration, and others are for it, and so there's divided thinking here. And then third house also represents traveling, so there could be a lot of travel involved here, especially like local commuting, not long distance, but local commuting, local traveling. So then the fourth house here, fourth house lord is this debilitated but full moon in the eighth house. So again, deep issues and sadness and trying to protect home. The fourth house is also education, mother, happiness, property. So like, really trying to hunker down at home and protect it, and also protect like the lineage. So yeah, I mean, a lot of that going on, and in both those examples of both LA and then the issues with Harvard University going on currently. So on this slide, everything on the left is the same. It's just my notes on the right are different. So the fifth house lord is Sun, and we have Mars and Ketu. So we've been talking about this. So an unyielding, fiery mind, a destructive, explosive energy in a public venue or high level, seeking leadership. Mars and Ketu together can also be like machine malfunctions, like literally, like so. It could be going on. The other thing with the fifth house representing children, Mars and Ketu together could be like unusual actions. So regarding children, so this could be something like IVF therapy. It could also be, frankly, and hopefully, not, but it might also represent like a miscarriage, unfortunately. So yeah, for like Aries, Lugna rising people, probably the summer is not the greatest time to be trying to get pregnant, frankly. But and then there can be other things going on. So other versions of this, right, of explosive energy. So Mars again represents property, and then we have again in a fixed fire sign. So this is like ongoing fire, and then something unusual about it. So this could be an earthquake. But actually, I was thinking even more so like volcano because of the fixed fire energy. This is like not just an explosion, but like something fiery that, continues like lava flowing down the side of a volcano or something like, or throwing ash or something like that. And then again, the LA protests are getting more violent. California is suing now, so it's really kind of blowing up there. The sixth house is the Lord is Mercury. So again, this could be sorting through different issues, but sixth house represents daily activities. So there's a dualness here, and also the sixth house represents enemies and problems and stuff like that. So, Mercury's an Ardra, so it could be like, again, acute disruptions and order routines and enemies. And then Saturn's aspecting here from Uttara Bhadrapada. So even more disorder to enemy, through enemies and for daily routines. The seventh house lord is Venus, and luckily, Venus is aspecting its own house, so there's some protection for the seventh house. Um, and then also Jupiter is aspecting here. So, that's pretty nice. So there's some protection of independent business and partnerships, spouse-like partners, that sort of thing. But again, Venus is still in K2 star. And so there's still going to be this unusual energy here being brought into the seventh house matters. And then Jupiter there. Again, it's still better that Jupiter and Venus are there than not. But it may seem like there's some protection, but also like some lack of balance or, underlying instability going on here. Yeah, because again, if you spin this chart to the seventh house and make that the first house, Venus is going to be in karko position because Venus represents spouse-like partner, and it's going to be in the seventh house from the seventh. So, um, yeah, actually, Venus is what we would call bhavam in this chart. Let me just check. Any others? No. Venus is bhavam. So what that means is like one relationship after another, one partner or another is getting involved in the situation. So that's what I mean is it's like you can see that this is like rather than like just a blip on the screen, it looks like this is spreading here. like this might be that like, one university starts the protest and then it starts growing, or like, LA starting the protest and now San Francisco is getting on board, and then there might be others. So yeah, the summer, like I mentioned, is going to be pretty intense, unfortunately. So, um, but again, the seventh house, seeking to balance or resurrect relationships and partners, independent business, some protection and counseling going on here. But again, it may not be the most balanced or stable type of energy, you know. So, the eighth house lord is Mars, it aspects its own house, so there's some strength here. Sun also aspects, and Moon is here. So, this is going to be a fiery, competitive, leadership, rebellious, emotional mind. This is not a peace-seeking, situation. Again, the only kind of real saving grace is at least it's Venus. But, again, Venus is an Ashwini, but pretty soon you can see within a few days Venus is going to move into Bharani. Bharani is a much more intense nakshatra than Ashwini. It's symbolized by a womb, so there's cycles of birth and death. And then after that, it goes into Krittika as well. So it's going to be in this nurturing, fighting energy. So again, Venus is not, sweet little, strawberry shortcake type of energy that it usually portrays, but at least there's some, at least it's Venus here at the top and not whatever, Mars and Ketu or whatever, that would be much worse. So yeah, and then the eighth house here, eighth house lord is Mars. Oh, I mentioned that. Okay, and the other thing about the eighth house is there could be something related to secrets and scandals um, that are kind of like exploding on the public um, in the public forum. So another situation that's going on in the United States is that President Trump has also had a public falling out with one of his advisors, Elon Musk. An entrepreneur, pretty famous entrepreneur. So, they were all buddy, and Elon Musk helped, at least his claims are he helped, Trump get elected and that sort of thing. And they were, schmoozing and rubbing elbows for a while. And then now they've had a falling out, and basically Trump is, or not Trump, but Elon Musk is no longer involved. And then they had an altercation online where they're going back and forth. And Elon Musk was spilling secrets about, I don't know if they're true, but he was saying that like Trump was involved with Epstein, who was a man who was charged with all sorts of like, I don't know, human trafficking, sexual assault type stuff, some. So yeah, anyway, so, basically they're like, slinging at each other in the media and, with these different accusations and, just going at each other in public, so as if there's not enough chaos. So we've got that going on as well. So, but again, that's like a, revealing to the public, like the secrets of authority. And then Trump was basically saying he was going to cut contracts for Elon Musk's companies, government contracts. Anyway, just another example of the chaos going on, frankly. So then the ninth house here, moving on. The ninth house lord is Jupiter, which is combust. So again, and the ninth house represents higher education, like universities, and it represents authority, government, also represents religion and spirituality. So the ninth house lord is this combust Jupiter. Luckily, it aspects its own sign, so that's going to be offered some protection, more to like physical, tangible things more than people. And then also it's going to be aspected by Mercury. So you can see like this Jupiter and Mercury, they literally just got a war like a few hours ago. So Jupiter and Mercury. So again, that's that, fighting it with words and theories and ideas going on. And philosophy is going on. And again, Jupiter's moving into Ardra very soon. So there are even more fiery, stormy energy coming. So this could be digital communication because Ardra can represent electricity. So a lot of this, again, fighting stuff is going on, literally in the digital media and stuff like that. So digital communication regarding education, university law, higher education, seeking justice, also sudden shock. Again, more traveling. So again, it just seems like there's this like spreading energy that's involved in the chart. Then the 10th house lord is Saturn, I mentioned, so loss of employment, daily actions, reputation. So there's all this like fighting and, like verbal fighting and again, physical fighting in the 5th house. But it's like, we're losing like money and people and, time and energy on these things. So that's evident here. The 11th house lord is also Saturn, and it's aspected by Jupiter and Mars. So again, there's Jupiter and Mars together give like a law enforcement. So there's ambition with law enforcement here. Again, loss of income through groups, class act. This could also be a class action suit, which is funny. I wrote class action suit, and then here it's like California sues Trump, the Trump administration, and that's essentially like a class action suit in a way. But this could be other kind of class action suits going on besides at the level of California. Unusual ambition, rapid, obsessive action, seeking justice, leadership. So this is that like flushing out, of the garment district in LA that I see here. And then the 12th house lord is Jupiter. Again, it's combust. You can't see it. And it's a dual water sign. So mixed emotions regarding land and property. Saturn is there. It's aspected by Mars. The other thing is Saturn and Mars together represent like engineering. And just Pisces in the 12th house, that represents like water and overseas. So, and again, that could be picking up like LA, but, besides, all the stuff going in the United States, this could be like other places in the world, like where there's loss of land and property, especially near water. So maybe this potentially volcano earthquake that may, explosion that might be happening would potentially be near the water. Like that's a possibility. So anyway, fairly intense stuff going on here. So, but hopefully you at least get a flavor of what's going on. So I'm going to go through the amshas now, the sub-zodiacs, and then we'll see what we see and see if we can get some more information, especially about timing. Okay, so here are the sub-zodiacs and amshas. They're still divisional charts. So what these are, if you're not familiar, is that these charts are derived by slicing and dicing up the main natal chart in different ways, into smaller and smaller pieces to get these subcharts. And each subchart is related to a different area of life. These subcharts are mostly used for timing, but they do give some additional information. But you don't usually analyze these in isolation. You usually look at these and bring the information integrate with the main chart. Okay, so what I've listed at the top here is the dasha period. So again, we're currently at the time of this full moon we're in Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Ketu, and then we're switching to Mercury, Jupiter, Mercury on September 6th. Okay, so those are the planets that I've circled here in these charts. You can see Mercury in green, Ketu in gray, Jupiter in yellow, Saturn in blue. And then, so what you want to watch for is, again, all of these are active now, but then the Saturn and Ketu energy in this Jha sequence is going to drop off. Okay, so at this particular moment, Saturn and Ketu are a little more important for the current moment. And both of these, again, are separationist and destructive planets. So that's why, like, luckily, hopefully, Mercury and Jupiter, again, we could see potentially more negotiating and bringing some, order to the chaos happening, at the end of the summer, early fall. Okay, so here on this slide, we have the Navamsha D9 for spouse and partnerships and the Drake and the D3 for siblings. So in the D9, we have Jupiter is not well placed. So again, that's that combust Jupiter of balance and justice and law. It is, wait a minute, this one, I don't know. I'm just trying to understand what I wrote. Oh, that's what a dispositor. Okay, so Mars, its dispositor is sitting in the fifth house of, again, where Mars is in the natal chart. So there's this more kind of, again, fiery energy in the fifth house of children and advising. And Mars is aspecting Jupiter. And again, Mars and Jupiter together give a legal energy. And then Saturn is aspecting Jupiter as well. So there's delays and obstacles and, problems, chronic issues going on with Jupiter. So this could be like loss of legal actions and stuff like that. Now, the thing to watch, if as we go through these amshas, watch how many times Saturn is with or aspecting Jupiter. Okay, so Saturn again is in that uccha budrapa energy, so funeral pyre energy, and then Jupiter is already compromised because it's combust, and then Jupiter is switching into that ardra energy, storm cloud energy, very soon. So that's going to, really weigh down Jupiter even more in terms of balance, justice, fairness, law. And then what you're also going to see through a lot of these charts, amazingly, the number of charts, is that Ketu and Saturn will be in the lugna, the top, and or the fifth house. So this temporary period of the Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Ketu that's happening through the summer, well, summer in the northern, winter in the southern hemisphere, we're going to have more of this chaotic separatist energy going on here. And again, counseling and fifth house issues, children advising, stage, platforms, all this kind of stuff going on. Okay, so K2 and Saturn in the Kendras, so just watch for those. You'll see it happens a bunch of times. K2 and Saturn in the Kendras. This is a lot of unusual foreign energy here. This again, is a flash moment. Picking up this flash moment here. Mercury and Saturn are in parivartana, so there's an exchange of houses. So Mercury is strong, Saturn's strong, but we're picking up the second house of speech and the 10th house of daily action here. So this is like, again, I think some strength in keeping steady, trying to keep things steady while all this kind of fiery stuff that's going on around is what's going on with partner here. And we were seeing that like in the main chart, the natal chart, is that Jupiter was aspecting the seventh house, but Venus was aspecting the seventh house. And Venus aspecting the seventh house, which is its own sign, is going to provide some protection to the seventh house. So it looks like if it was a couple we were looking at rather than like some sort of national situation, it looks like the the native is sort of under fire, and the partner is a bit protected and maybe even like holding down the fort while the partner is in the middle of all that chaos, frankly. It could be going down like that. Okay. So then the Drake in a D3 here, all the grahas are well placed, so that's a nice sign. But again, you can see Saturn aspecting the lugna. So this Saturn K2 subperiod is going to ding the lugna. And whenever you are dinging the lugna in these subcharts, that means you're dinging the whole chart. And again, that's what I said, like keep watching how many times K2 and Saturn, these subperiods would seem like, oh, it's just a few days. Well, a lot can happen in a few moments or a few days. So yeah, so again, delays and obstacles for the whole chart. And again, that's in the siblings. So this is related to like the third house, which we were seeing like things starting to heat up with Mercury already in Ardra, and then Jupiter moving into Ardra. So and in this subchart here in D3, K2 is Swan, the fifth house. So again, unusual advice and disruptions regarding fifth house matters of counseling, children, romance, potentially. And then on this slide, we have the Saptamsha D7 for children and the Dwadashamsha D12 for parents and grandparents. In the D7, all grahas are well placed, but look, Saturn is exalted in the Lagna again, and K2 is in the 5th house. And that's the energy you're picking up with these subperiods here. Jupiter is exalted, that's nice, but Saturn is also aspecting Jupiter. So again, Saturn's dragging down Jupiter even more. Okay, so yeah, difficulties with children, and then K2's in Aquarius. So again, Aquarius is a fixed air sign. This is like unusual advice and, maybe separating, idea separation, like of separating from chronic or fixed ideology about children here. Maybe that's what's blowing up is it's like, maybe like if we're talking about like weird, unusual advice, like maybe the thing is it's like maybe some kid is like acting out. That could be that Mars and K2 in the 5th house of like acting out. And it's just like at some point it's like, you gotta cut this crap out, man. You can like try to, be kind and gentle or whatever. And at some point it's like, sometimes you just gotta call people on their stuff and it's like, you can't keep doing this, man. It's like, and you got to draw a line, that might be what's going on, like as far as this 5th house stuff, Um, so yeah, so again, that's not the typical advice. Most people are like, oh yeah, be patient, they'll grow out of it. And at some point, like, you can't like enable them in anymore. It's just like, look, this is not acceptable. You got to draw a line. So yeah, and then the thing is actually Mars is aspecting. So you have Mars and K2 again in the 5th house in the D7 here. And again, this Saturn exalted in the top here, this could be about like, literally like getting tough, and saying, enough's enough, So then the Dwadashamsa D12, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn not well placed, that's not looking super great. But there is a parivartana between Sun and Jupiter. So again, there's some, strength here with Jupiter and Sun. And both of those, Venus and Jupiter with Mars in the 5th house, or not 5th house, 6th house here of enemies and routines. And then Jupiter goes up with Sun here. So again, there's a lot of counseling of leadership going on with the parents, the grandparents, but also like I would say elders or older generations. And then we have again K2 in the 5th house again, Saturn aspecting K2. Like there's again all this like weird stuff going on with 5th house issues. The other thing is we have Sun at the top here. So in the D12 with parents and grandparents, when we have Sun in the top lugna here, that means there's potentially issues with father, or again, Sun, other things Sun represents, like presidents, uh, authority, sort of thing. Yeah, and again, Saturn and K2 in the 5th house, like the advice here is like separation or some kind of unusual advice about like separation or something like that, or endings. It's like, again, like an unusual, not the typical, like again, strawberry shortcake Venus energy going on here. Yeah, so what else do we have? So then we have on the next few slides, like career and income related amshas. So at the top here, the dashamsha D10 for career. Again, look, you got Saturn at the top in its own sign. So again, there's like, getting serious, Saturn in its own sign of getting serious, getting practical, getting tough. K2 again in the 5th house. I mean, it's just over and over again. It's like kind of amazing how many times this happens. And then you can see Venus is karako bhava nasha in the 7th house. So problem with, relationships. And Jupiter's not well placed, so Jupiter's even more compromised. So again, with this Saturn and K2 placement, losses, delays, unusual advice, Venus karako bhava, trouble with partners. So, and we saw in the main chart, Saturn, the lord of the 4th house, going to the 12th of losses and expenditures. So yeah, the Ekadamsha D11, look, K2 in the Lugna again. So again, we're running these sub-periods of Saturn K2, and so this small, quote unquote, small sub-period is like dinging all these, it's like whatever's happening in the sort of surface, like in the main chart, is like reverberating like deep and broadly through the whole chart, through these amshas as well. So yeah. So the Lugnatia Mercury is not well placed, so that's also going to compromise the chart. Ketu's in the Lugna, usual events, ideas. Saturn is Swan in the 9th house. So that Saturn is bureaucracy and and ideology here. And again, Saturn's with Jupiter, so it's going to bring down Jupiter even more. And Venus is karako bhava. So again, relationship issues, trouble with partners, unusual, and then the Saturn Swan and Aquarius with Jupiter, like I can literally see like the government blocking, bureaucracy of government blocking like education, finance stuff going on here. Because Jupiter and Venus can also represent finance. So, yep. So what else do we have? So on this chart, we have Chaturtamsha D4 for assets and Siddhamsha D24 for education. So Jupiter and Saturn not well placed. Saturn's aspecting Ketu in the 5th house again. Saturn rules the Lugna. So, so again, disruptions, troubles, delays, weird advice, lack of order. Because Mercury's, Swa in the 9th house of authority and government, we have Saturn aspecting it. So, lack of order and with authority. Then the Siddhamsha D24, Ketu is at the top in the Lugna. Saturn's aspecting Ketu. Saturn's on Jupiter. Like, I'm just like, there are just so many levels. It's just like, this is pretty deep, pretty intense. So all grahas are well placed. At least that's nice. Ketu and Saturn in the Lugna. Disruptions in education, teachers, daily work. Yeah, so it's, more of the same of what we're seeing in the natal chart. And here we have health stuff. I didn't get into health really in the natal chart, so let's see what we have here. I would imagine it's just like stress, but it could be physical things like that. Mars and Ketu in the 5th house. 5th house represents like upper GI, but also chest area. This could be like a injury to the chest. It could also be like heart attacks. Yeah, hopefully not. But Mars and Ketu in the 5th house could be like could also be heart stuff, upper GI stuff, like Mars and Ketu. I imagine like reflux, gastric reflux. It could be like an ulcer, that kind of thing, besides like a cardiac event, explosive cardiac event. So what else do we have here? So we have the D6 at the top for acute issues, the D8 in the middle for chronic issues, and the D27 for strength and resilience. So at the top, Saturn is not well placed, and it's aspecting the 5th house again, and also aspecting Jupiter. So, and K2 is in the Lugna again. So yeah, there's going to be some acute issues. Luckily, Mercury is Swa, and that's the sponsor for K2. So hopefully that means this is going to keep K2 in check a little bit. And Mars is aspecting Saturn in its own sign, and Saturn is aspecting its own sign in the 5th house. So there may be some initial protections for whatever event is going on here. Then in the D8, Mercury is not well placed. There's a parivartana between Mercury and Venus that should give some protection. Saturn is aspecting the 5th house again. It's also with Jupiter. So yeah, but you can see here, Ketu, Rahu, Moon, and Sun are all sitting here in the 9th house. So in these health amshas, we keep picking up like 9th house stuff. The 9th house can be spirituality, religion, authority, government, and the 9th house can also be like the leg, like the upper part of the leg, between the hips and the knees, essentially like the thigh region, that kind of thing. So there might be issues going on there. Then the Bhamsha D27 for strength and resilience. Mercury and Saturn are not well placed. Saturn again is aspecting the 5th house. So again, the other thing is Saturn keeps picking up the 5th house and all of these issues. So again, 5th house stuff. So children, upper GI, or unfortunately, like explosive events. And again, it's mechanical. So there's some sort of physical injury, accident, malfunction going on here. Mars and Ketu in the fifth house could also be like a pacemaker, some sort of like physical, implement in the chest area, like a pacemaker could be happening as well. So, yeah, so it's pretty tough looking like here. Okay, so on this side we have spirituality and worship. So at the top, Panchamsha D5 for innate spirituality, and then the Vimshamsha D20 for formal worship. So Mercury and Jupiter not well placed in the D5, and again, those are the main planetary periods, Mercury and Jupiter. Luckily, Jupiter's Swa, so that's nice. That'll give some protection. Jupiter and Mercury in the 8th house here can also indicate changes and endings. So Jupiter and Mercury represent speech, but also education. And you can see Saturn again in the 5th house, and Mars from the 5th house is aspecting this Jupiter and Mercury in the 8th house. So this could be like some new education here regarding spirituality. So maybe somebody's converting, or maybe somebody's studying Shastra, like classical text, and whatever, faith they have, the Torah, the Quran, the Bible, the Gita, whatever it may be. Yes, and Ketu is Swan in the 9th house. So again, there could be an unusual break with government authority, like a spiritual authority, or it could be like kind of an initiation into some unusual religious or spiritual group. Because the 9th house is also satsang, so spiritual community. So it looks like there's some changes, pretty deep changes going on here. And then the Jupiter Swan with Mercury in the 8th house. The 8th house can also represent esoterica. So maybe the innate spirituality is also picking up like some study of like Jyotish, Vedic Astrology, or tarot card reading, or Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, or something like that. The Kabbalah, or something like that. That's shifting the innate spirituality. So the kind of on your own type, do-it-yourself type of spirituality. Then the Vimshamsha D20, Jupiter and Saturn not well placed together, but at least Jupiter is Swa in the 3rd house. So again, changes and endings. Saturn is aspecting Mercury. So again, Saturn with Jupiter and aspecting Mercury, there's some change, structural change to communication and education here going on. And then Saturn is on the So and there's some news or announcement, I would say, regarding changes in education. The other thing is when you have Saturn in its own sign or aspecting its own sign in the 5th house with Mercury, that can indicate like the 5th house can also indicate things like mantras, tantra, yantra, that sort of thing. So it looks like there's some more formal education of speech or change of speech, which again could be like maybe starting to chant mantras, that kind of thing going on in a formal way. Like maybe the Saturn is also aspecting the 9th house, so so maybe this is like doing some group chanting or kirtan or something like that. Could be going on here. Yeah. So here at the bottom, I have like a tally for all of these charts. There's 14 total charts, including the natal chart. So in 10 out of 14 charts, either Saturn or Ketu is on the lugna. And again, these sub-periods here is hanging Saturn and Ketu. So unusual delays, obstacles, unusual events through almost every chart. Saturn or Ketu is on the 5th house in 10 out of 14 charts. So that 5th house is really, frankly, complete chaos, really. So hold on to your hats, people. And then Saturn is on Jupiter in 8 out of 14 charts. And again, Jupiter's already compromised because it's combust and now it's going into Ardra. So there's probably, unfortunately, going to be losses related to Jupiterian things. So law, education, children. Yeah. So again, all this together, separation, difficulties, destruction, property, law, children, education. Unfortunately, that seems like what's going on here. So Not super great news, but luckily again, relatively short period. So let's hope we move through it unscathed in relatively short order. So as always, thanks so much for stopping by and listening to one of my talks. Again, all my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. For famous birth charts that I've analyzed on the channel, check out my birth charts archive list 2025 video. For individual birth chart readings, email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info. I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, yoga, homeopathy, naturopathic medicine. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that resource is available to you as well. And as always, thanks so much for all your support on the channel, all the likes and shares and subscribes and donations sent in and lovely comments. Yeah, it's just really amazing. So thank you all for that. And as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so take good care. Until the next one. Namaste.